Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. Welcome back to the Retail Initiative. I'm excited that you're here. Hopefully, the last few episodes have been super helpful. I can't tell you how excited I am to have this thing back. I missed doing it so much, but as you might guess, we all have these seasons in business where we have to say no to good things to focus on something better. And that's what the podcast really became for me. But today, here's what I want to get into. Two big things. One, I want to share some of my biggest lessons from 2025, the things that I learned. And as I do that, I want to talk through like some good ways to evaluate the year, what was good, what could have been better. And then I'd love to talk through goal setting and the way that I approach goal setting. And I think if you follow it, I think it'll be really helpful for you to think about the new year in a different way. Because here's the thing that I love. I think that let's be real. I think that, and maybe you've seen this, I think that New Year's resolutions and New Year's in general, like kind of gets a bad rap. I think because maybe we set goals for ourselves before, we didn't follow through, all of a sudden we're like, well, there's nothing special about the new year. Like you can do that anytime. And yes, that's true. You can evaluate your life, evaluate your business at any given moment. You can make decisions that you want to be different at any time. Like you just have to make a decision and do it. But what a better time than the turning of a year that we just get to click reset on our life, on our business, and say, hey, these are the things that I want to be different. And I think how we do that is we look back and we have to evaluate what's great, what's not great, what can change. And then we have to set new goals. And I like to see goals as a standard. It is a standard that you're setting for yourself. It's not just something we want to accomplish. It really is a new standard. And at that point, like we get to live up to this aspiration of who we want to be. So I learned some awesome things this year that I think could be encouraging for you, especially with where the retail world is. Just to be transparent, so I do this event with my friend Tara, and honestly, like it was a perfect storm of like the dates that we picked with all these different pieces. And like normally that event sells out super, super, super fast. And this year it didn't. This was the first year we ever didn't sell out. And like that kind of started this thing. And I was stressed in my own business. We were doing really well, but I don't know why. I was just stressed about it. And I started, like, I remember talking to a marketing dude that we work with, and I was like, this webinar needs to convert. Like, it needs to. I don't know if you've ever done that, like where you go into something, you're like, this needs to work, and it needs to work fast. And I get why we do that. Like, at the end of the day, we all have bills to pay. But I found myself looking at everything in terms of what do I need? What do I need in order to pay my bills? What do I need in order to do these things? And I recently was doing a challenge that my coach has us going through, and I'm rereading the book 10x is easier than 2x, which if you've never read that, of like any business book that you should be reading, 10x is easier than 2x by Benjamin Hardy might be like number one on my list. And I'll get into that idea here in a minute. But there was a chapter that really spoke to me, and it really became one of the biggest lessons that I learned. And it's operating out of want, not out of need. When we operate out of need, we're operating out of a scarcity mindset. Like there's a finite amount of things and I have to go and get what's mine so I can do the things that I need, rather than operating out of, well, what do I want? Like, what do I want my business to be? What do I want my life to be? And then what can I put in place to support that? And purely by shifting that mentality, it brings fun to it again. It brings fun to, like, it's not that this webinar, quote unquote, needs to convert. It's like, what do I want to do? I really want to put out really valuable content that's helpful because I enjoy doing that. I enjoy telling stories. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy solving problems. That stuff's fun for me. And so I'm going to do what I want to do. But weirdly, when I do those things, that tends to attract more people. But when I go into those webinars, like needing people to book calls or do whatever at the end of them, there's like an energy of that that's just night and day different. And so for you as a retailer, if you're in a place where you're like, ugh, I'm not growing like I want or whatever, and we're just looking at need, instead, what if we could ask ourselves, like, what do I want right now? Well, I want more sales. Like, okay, cool, but what else? What kind of impact are you wanting to make? What do you want your business to look like day to day? And how can we start to operate out of what we want purely because we want it and not purely out of our needs? When we operate out of our needs, it's a place of scarcity. When we operate out of our wants, that is out of abundance. The next thing that I learned, and I'm going to get into this when I get into goal sharing, is to always start with values when it comes to defining the things that we do. And here's what I mean by that. I was doing that exercise in that 10X challenge where we had to list out our values. And so I wrote some things, and one of which was freedom. Well, so that's a core value that I want to be like a signature part of my life, meaning like I have the freedom to do things that I want to do. But what if I started looking, okay, what is it going to take for my business to grow? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a webinar every single Tuesday at 6 p.m. What does that now do to my weeks? I am robbing myself of freedom. And so for you, what I think this applies to is like, what do you want your life to look like and what values drive it? And then out of that, what business strategy, what things that we want to accomplish is going to not go against our values? I think that's one of the mistakes. Like I read advice all the time. It's like, how can retailers grow? And the advice is go live all the time. It's just go live, go live. And look, like I get online sales have worked for some people. So if that's you, by all means, like that's great. But here's what I do want to say is like, if that's not the life that you want, don't feel like you need to do it. I had a really good friend that built a massively successful online business doing live sales. And when I say massively successful, like 8 figures, massively successful, almost entirely on live sales. And what was fascinating, I'm friends with the husband, but she went on vacation. It was their first vacation in a long, long time. And, they're there on the beach. She's drinking a margarita, reading a book. And then she starts doing the math in her head of like, how much am I losing by being on this vacation? And she started figuring out, like, by her team going live instead of her going live, what would the difference in sales look like? And she realized that the vacation was not the $10,000 the trip cost, like for the flights and the bougie resort and all of that cool stuff. It was a 6-figure vacation because her sales were going to be down that much. She had built a business that at the end of the day, like she could not operate out of freedom to enjoy the success of. And so for you, think through, like, what do I want my life to look like? And then how can I build a business that supports that? Because the thing that I want every retailer to know is there are other ways. No matter what way you're being told, if you want to grow, you have to do X. If that thing just goes against the values of what you want your life and business to look like, there's always another way. You do not have to do live sales. In fact, our most successful clients, none of them do live sales. Not one. There's other ways. Gosh, you don't want to be online. You don't want to do online sales. Great. Like there's other ways to grow. You can grow a massively successful brick and mortar business without focusing on growing online. It's really around what do you want to build? And then we can reverse engineer like, hey, what do I need to get in place to get there? So that was a huge lesson for me that applied to capital commerce and the things that we're doing in our own agency. And I want to apply it in the retail world because I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us. And then the last big lesson, this quote, I forget where I heard it, but it was this. You can say what you see, or you can see what you say. You can say what you see, or you can see what you say. Here's what that means to me. If I told you right now, like, hey, don't think about blue trucks, and then you go for a drive, what are you going to start doing? You're going to start noticing every blue truck. If you've ever thought about buying a car and you start researching, what do you do when you drive around? You start noticing that car everywhere. But here's what we know to be true. Are there more of those cars out on the road that day that you were researching it? Or because you were focused on it, you started noticing it more? I think that's what we do in life is when we focus on the negative, when we focus on the challenges, on whatever it is. So in the retail world, like a lot of the things that I'm hearing are the economy and changing in people's buying habits and these things. And we focus on that. I'm not saying that we can't acknowledge it. I have a whole episode on toxic positivity where I dig into that. But when we can acknowledge those things, but when we focus on it and dwell on it, what do we start doing? Our mind starts looking for evidence that it's true. Our mind will start searching out like proof that the economy is tanking your business. It'll search out proof that people's buying habits have shifted and your business is doomed. But there's a huge but here. If we start thinking like that isn't necessarily true, people are still shopping. They are still buying. There is room for growth and I can now take control of that. Our brain will do the exact same thing. It'll start looking for things to reinforce the idea that there is still hope. There is a chance for you to be massively successful. You attract what you focus on. And the argument, whether you want to be woo-woo about it and say that you literally attract it, like you brought it to you, or you want to not be woo-woo about it, but we can just say like you notice the things that you think about. When you think about it, you start noticing it. And so why focus on those negative pieces and starting, like you just reinforce the idea. So I'm not saying we can't acknowledge it. You should acknowledge outside circumstances, but we have to look at the side that says, okay, but what about this can I control? I'm not going to give the future of my business to all this control into the economy. Like I'm not going to let the economy dictate the future of my business. I'm going to say like, no, what are the things I can control the way we're using social, our paid ad strategy, or email strategy. I can control the way I know my perfect customer. And I'm going to go all in on the things I can control. Because at the end of the day, like that's what I want to own the future of my own business. So when we look at like, how do we look back through the year to kind of bring it into goal setting? I do like to start with a review of the previous year. And so here, I'm not going to walk through like my full deal, but basically like I start with gratitude. What am I grateful for this year? Who in my team am I grateful for? What impact did I make? What impact did my business make? I always want to start from a place of gratitude. Then I want to dig into like, what did I enjoy this year? What was fun? Who was fun to be around? Who was encouraging for me? Who wasn't particularly encouraging that I maybe need to spend less time with? And so I want to start digging like, what do I enjoy? What did I not enjoy? And then in business, one of the things that I love to do is look at 3 challenges and 3 successes. And within each challenge and success, I want to look at what outside circumstances contributed to those results. So let's say it's a challenge and we had this big launch online and it didn't go as well as we want. Okay, what outside circumstances? Instagram's algorithm changed, the economy wasn't doing super hot, and like your ads manager went down that weekend. Those are outside circumstances that impacted it. Then I want to look at, okay, what are 3 things within my control that impacted the results of this? I want to be forced to, yes, acknowledge there were outside circumstances that contributed, but I want to have to take ownership for that result at the end of the day. And then what the next big question is, okay, in the new year, do I want a different result for this? With how do we mitigate against the things that were out of our control? How do we make sure that that is a non-issue next year? And then 2, how can we shift the things that were within our control? So if the algorithm changed, how can we make sure that we aren't leaning into social media entirely for our traffic next year? Right? And so I like to look at last year, think through what I enjoyed, what I'm grateful for, look at these different circumstances. So let's talk 2025. I am all about not thinking just 1 year out. In fact, I like to start the conversation thinking 5 years out. And so the most helpful thing, I was being mentored for a bit by Bob Negan from Whizbang Retail Training. He's a good friend, brilliant speaker and teacher. And one of the first things that he had me do was write a future statement. And what that was, and I would encourage you to do this. So pick the date. So let's say it is January 1st, 2030. It is January 1st, 2030. And we want to write a statement as though that's today. And here we want to start to answer some key questions. So one, you wake up, it's just a random day. How do you feel? When you wake up 5 years from now, how do you feel that day? What did you do? Like, what did your morning look like? You went to the office. What did it look like? Or you went to your store. Like, what did you smell when you walked in? What did your team look like? Did you walk into a warehouse that maybe doesn't exist? Did you walk into your store? Does it look exactly like it looks right now? Here's the thing that you'll start noticing. If what you describe is what exists today and you're feeling burnout, that may be why. The whole idea of hope comes from a future better version of our life. And if we don't have this future better version, if we don't see that our future can be any better, we're really going to struggle to actually want to move forward, because why put all this effort in when it's not going to lead to something better? So this exercise one will reveal, like, do I have hope that my future can be better than my present? And that doesn't mean that you're not grateful for your present, but I think we all want this future better version of who we can be, what our business can be, the impact we can be making, the spouse that we are, all of these things we want to improve. I never want to be someone that is decreasing. I want to increase in these pieces. So one, you woke up. How did you feel? What do you do? Like, what did your day look like? What did you focus on? What did you not focus on? How are you making decisions that day? What do you have? Like, I don't think it should all be about like how much money or any of those pieces, but I do think that that's an aspect that can start to reveal what we want in the future. And then what are you believing at that point? Here, what we want to start to think through is, like, let's be real. If you could talk to yourself, let's say 5 years ago, if you could talk to 5 year ago version of yourself, are there not things that you would be like, hey, like, don't focus on that. That's a waste of time. Focus on this instead. I think we could all look back at our college selves and be like, hey, you aren't busy. You may think you're busy, but you're not at all. So what we want to do is start with a 5-year vision and write it in the present time. Like, today is this day, and these are some important things. Then I want to go and list out what values drive my life. So for me, it was things like discipline, that I'm okay doing hard things to get results that I want. Family truly first. I think a lot of us say that, but I really want to live that out. I talked about freedom, and then I'm able to spend my time and my energy like I want to. Those were examples from mine, but list out the drivers that you really want, like, fueling your life. Now, so we've done 5 years. Well, now we can come forward to a year from now and say, okay, for that to happen, what would need to exist within the next 12 months in order to do that? And here's one of the ways that I like to do it is that same thing I talked about with evaluating this year is I'll actually do the same thing, but I will do it as though I'm evaluating my year. I'm evaluating the year before. So I will now say it is January 1st, 2026, and I will evaluate 2025 as though it already happened. And I now want to look at what drove my growth, what things that I focus on, what things could have been a distraction. But by going into the future and then looking back, you really can start to, like, reverse engineer. And so I know that that's a different approach to goal setting. It's not just a revenue number. I want to grow by 10%. Like, those things are not bad things, but I would much rather build my goals around what I want my life and my business to look like, rather than letting the results of my business drive it. Because I think there's this idea that, like, once I get to blank, then I will do something. I had a good friend who was working like 90-hour weeks, and he's like, once I get to X level, I'll be able to focus on my kids like I want. And it's like, but you won't. If you, like, it's like giving people that are giving by nature generous with their time and their money, they're like that when they're broke, and they will be like that when they're rich. Very rarely does someone get rich and all of a sudden become generous. So what we want to start to do is really think through, what do I want my life and my business to look like? And how do we start to bring that into the present? So this is a little bit of a different episode. It's a lot of the things that I've learned this year, and I wanted to distill it into one episode that I hope encourages you going into the new year. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If it was, one, like, shoot me a DM at Retail Josh. I love when people do that. And if you do find this helpful, leave a review. That helps us find people. And we have a ton of free resources for you at madebycapital.com/podcast. Again, that's madebycapital.com/podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Happy New Year. I can't wait to see what's coming for you in the next year, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Retail Initiative Podcast. If you want more free resources, trainings, downloads, you can get those at madebycapital.com/podcast. Again, that's madebycapital.com/podcast. And for those of you that are serious and really want to take the success that you've built in your brick and mortar storefront and you want to create that same level of success online, I invite you to schedule a free call with me at madebycapital.com/schedule, where we'll dig into your business, like where things are now, where you're wanting to go, getting really clear on your goals, and what are the 2 or 3 things that might be standing in the way of getting there. Now, look, if we're a good fit, I'd love to share what that looks like. And if not, my hope is that you leave with clarity on where to focus for you to reach your goals. So again, thanks for tuning in. And as always, leave a review, make sure you're subscribed, and I cannot wait to see you next time.